We're here today to talk about equality, diversity, and inclusion in the current political climate in the UK, I should hesitate to say. And I'm joined by some fabulous panelists, and of course, it is also a great privilege to be here myself. And I'm beaming in from Dubai, but I'm no less committed. And it's a pleasure to meet lots of new people and also have some familiar faces that I can see in the attendance list. I'd like to thank, by the way, everybody at EDICa for putting together the whole day and also putting together this panel. So I'm joined today by Dr. Shewly Choudhury, by Dr. Anindya Raychaudhuri, and also Professor Angus Laing. And I'm not going to introduce them because I'm going to ask them to introduce themselves. And I'm going to start with you, Shewly. Would you like to introduce yourself to our audience, which is, by the way, at 40 and counting? And Andy, it's lovely to see you. Hello, big hug. And and I hope I don't talk too fast. I really will try. Okay, and we will all try our best. So Shewly,
Yes.
over to you. Do introduce yourself to our audience.
I'll do. Good afternoon, everybody. I will also try, Andy, not to talk too fast, something that I do often. And thank you very much, Heather. So welcome, everybody. Really glad you can join us. Lots to choose from, I could see from the other parallel sessions as well. So a little bit about me. So I'm Head of Research Careers and Culture at Cancer Research UK. And for those of you not familiar with Cancer Research UK, or CRUK for short, we are the largest medical charity in the UK. And as the name suggests, we're all about beating cancer for everyone. And I'm going to come back to that tagline later. So I'm a neuroscientist by training, and I've been working in the funding and policy area for around 20 years. And I love it. And the golden thread of my career has been very much around how do you support and enable talented researchers to thrive and create that enabling environment. And earlier on, some of you may have heard about how the onus should be on shifting away from giving the tools to just to the individual, and actually how do we move away from those harmful environments. And that's definitely been a mantra of my career. I've had the privilege of working at various funding organisations, and I'm going to bring that perspective today. So I've worked at the Wellcome Trust, the Royal Society, UKRI, and I've been at CRUK for 1 year. I also work with Multiple Sclerosis Society as a trustee, and also CRUK. And the reason I wanted to mention that is that their role is very much around how do you bring the evidence to support career development, and I think very relevant today. I'm going to talk later about some of the work that my team are doing, so I'm going to pause there. Back to you, Heather.
My technology is slowing me down a bit here. So thank you very much. That's lovely and great to hear from you, Shewly. So if I could come next actually to Angus. Angus, would you like to introduce yourself to everybody? We're now at 45.
Thanks, Heather. And good afternoon to everybody. Can I just, before we start, I want to express my thanks as the Dean of the host school for EDICa of the fantastic work that the EDICa team is doing. It really is. It's an outstanding example of research that is making a meaningful difference. Why do I think it's making a meaningful difference? I reflect back on a career that sadly has now run 3 decades. That's involved leading 3 business schools, Loughborough, Lancaster, and now Edinburgh Business School at Heriot-Watt. And over that time, in all those institutions, taken us through the Athena Swan process. So I think there's an element in me that sees EDI as an absolutely central part of what we've been doing over the time I've been in the sector. I also served for coming up for 5 years as chair of the Chartered Association of Business Schools, the UK representative body. And there was again a case where we led on a major push to ensure initially gender diversity, but then racial diversity and subsequently neurodiversity were seen as key themes in the business school sector as a whole. Why do I think this is relevant? The business school sector is large. It is one of the largest parts of the university sector in the UK in terms of staff numbers. So what we do, I think, is influential directly, but it's also influential because, like with projects like EDICa, we are exactly the place where this type of work ought to be undertaken. So I'm delighted to be here today and look forward to sharing thoughts with a range of colleagues. So Heather, back to you, Heather. Thank you very much.
Lovely. And then Anindya, can I ask you if you will introduce yourself too?
Sure. Thank you, Heather. Thank you, EDICa, and all the organizers for putting on a great event and for inviting me to speak. I have two hats. My first hat is I am the EDI lead for SAGSA, that is the Scottish Graduate School for Arts and Humanities. I'm also senior lecturer in English at the University of St Andrews, which is where I'm coming to you today from. My role as EDI lead has involved embedding EDI across all of the work that SAGSA does. For those of you who don't know, SAGSA is we are very proud to say it's the world's first national graduate school in arts and humanities. So when I talk today, I'll be talking specifically a little bit about challenges that are faced within the arts and humanities as opposed to the rest of the higher education sector, or much more so in arts and humanities, I should say, than in the rest of the higher education sector. Yes, looking forward to listening and sharing views and experiences.
That's lovely. Thank you very much, all of you. And I'm going to kick off by reminding us all that the title of our symposium today is that we are talking about equality, diversity and inclusion in the current political climate in the UK. Now, we're obviously a group of academics at Heriot-Watt who, leading EDICa, are based in Scotland. And but although the project itself obviously is much wider and involves many universities and many researchers, but we do have the interlay of the political climate in the whole of the UK, which affects research councils, research grants, which affects the decisions about where to allocate resources. And we have the situation in Scotland, which overlays the UK situation for those of us in Scotland. So there's quite a complex political landscape. And we have with us on this panel, and this is deliberately chosen, we have people representing funders, we have people representing the sector, and we have people representing academic leadership. And that is, three different angles, and we will expect to get, of course, three different sets of comments. I might, if I may, Angus, come to you first, because I know exactly how old Angus is, actually, everybody. I'll let you on to that. And I won't tell everybody, but I do know that as a result, you've had a long and illustrious career, and you have led many different business schools and seen a lot of different political landscapes during that time. So you've seen how things have evolved, and you've seen how the funding landscape has changed for business schools, and the importance of EDI changing over time. So would you like to give us your reflections? And I'm going to ask all three of the panel members to give their reflections on this concept of where are we today in this political climate, and where have we come from?
Heather, thanks. I know this is specifically about the UK, but I'm sorry, we're an interconnected world, and business schools are very, very much interconnected globally. And what happens in other parts of the world unequivocally impacts on us. Let's look at an example of one of business schools are significantly influenced by accreditation processes. We have an American and a European set of accreditations. The American accreditation body was of necessity had to do quite a significant shift in position following the re-election of Trump as president, and in the standards that ACSB, the American accrediting body, operates, the reference to DEI was dropped very, very rapidly. But these are standards that are used to shape, influence, develop business schools globally. So there was no escaping that global influence, that global impact on us. I have to say, I think there is particular credit due to business schools in Scandinavia who took a particularly hard, rigorous line in pushing back. British business schools were there. We were supporting that view, but the credit must go to the Scandinavian schools for pushing back on the dropping of DEI as a key theme within the business school environment from the American accrediting body. So it's this very toxic environment that sees something that I believe is absolutely central both to the ability to attract talent into business schools, but also to ensure that we have a diversity, a broad range of perspectives being brought to business schools. That being profoundly damaged by something, well, okay, let me try and maybe rephrase that, but certainly being harmed by, being challenged by events that are occurring entirely outside our jurisdiction. I think we have seen good pushback from, as I said, by the Scandinavian schools, but the non-US business schools around this agenda. And ACSB has, to a significant degree, backed down in terms of the way in which their approach is being applied. But this is something I would never, ever have anticipated in 15 plus years of leading business schools, because to me, EDI is not just ethically, morally the right thing to do, but pragmatically, it is exactly the right thing to do in terms of our capacity. I can continue, but I'm conscious we've got limited time, Heather. So maybe pick it up in subsequent elements of the discussion.
No, absolutely. Thank you, Angus. I'm noting the Q&A questions, everybody. Please do put your questions in the Q&A. We will address all of your questions. Anindya, can I come to you next? As you said at the beginning, when you introduced yourself, you have this double hat in that you serve in your day job, if you like, as a senior member of faculty at St Andrews, and so you see your experience of the political climate and the effects of EDI you see in your everyday work. But you also have one of what I understand is 5 leadership positions in the Scottish Graduate School. Is that right? And the Scottish Graduate School is in many ways a very much bigger playground, if you like, or bigger constituency. It's a better word, isn't it? Bigger constituency, even than the esteemed university you work for. So could you just tell us a little bit about how big that constituency is, what it covers, and then make your comments about EDI in the current political climate?
Absolutely, thank you. So SAGSA, the Scottish Graduate School for Arts and Humanities, we have 17 member institutions. We call them member HEIs because not all of them are technically universities, even though they all have degree awarding powers and they all have offer PhDs. We cover the range of arts and humanities across and interdisciplinary doctoral research. We provide a range of training that these are typically cross-institutional training and cohort building. So every year, nurturing a new cohort of HRC-funded Arts and Humanities Research Council-funded doctoral researchers from the start of their doctoral research journey to the end. We provide cohort building activities. We provide resources that allows them to go on and take up internships or visiting doctoral positions in abroad, as well as research expenses for archival work, field research, that kind of thing. And my role as EDI lead is to, broadly speaking, embed EDI across all of that activity. And in terms of the big challenge that we've faced in EDI terms, it's actually, as far as I'm concerned, quite simple, and it's finances. Over the last year, there's been a shift in the way arts and humanities doctoral research funding is allocated, but that shift in process has coincided with a drastic reduction in numbers. So as of last year, that this is the year that has just started this September, the HRC in Scotland through SAGSA were able to fund something in the region of between 40 and 50. The exact numbers differ from year to year. PhD scholarships, studentships, that has now gone down to 21. And one of the characteristics, or one of the consequences rather, of that is measures we put in to do with widening participation, positive actions such as ring fencing, reweighting. I can say more about the kinds of things we did if you like. That just becomes much harder. And associated with the cut in funding, associated with increased workloads, more precarity of colleagues at member HEIs, all of which has a disproportionate EDI impact, as we know, means that often the first thing to drop off institutional priority lists is EDI. That's not necessarily through a lack of respect or a lack of awareness of the importance. It becomes the thing that has to be dropped when there isn't enough time. So I think from my perspective, from the arts and humanities perspective, that is the biggest challenge, is we do not have enough bodies, we do not have enough resources to do the EDI work that needs to be done. And as a result, a lot of the EDI work that is being done is relying on people's goodwill, and goodwill is harder and harder to find because people are getting busier and busier.
Thank you for that reflection. And so, Shewly, can I come to you then? And you're obviously speaking from the position of a funder. I mean, not only the funder that you work for, but as you mentioned in your introduction, you have links in different ways to other funding bodies or other recipient bodies. So I would be very interested in you commenting from that angle and telling us about any changes that you have seen. I mean, we've had a relatively recent change of government in the UK, but for over a longer period of time, there have been some longer term type changes.
Yeah. Thank you, Heather. If I may, I might actually bring in another angle. I was just kind of thinking about this as Angus and Anindya did their intro, and something that really illustrated the EDI challenge for the sector that I work in. So Laura Kirby, who is the CEO of Prostate Cancer UK, did a really nice and I thought thoughtful piece in Third Sector magazine, for those of you who may be reading that. And the reason I wanted to highlight that is she was really open about in the current social and kind of political culture war climate, the impact it's having on medical charities. So they are, as they have found from, and we are also looking at this, men with a Black heritage background have more aggressive prostate cancer, but it's an underserved community for many complicated reasons, and we do need more research because we want to accelerate progress. They had, let's just say, racist commentary and people calling up saying, we are going to withdraw our donations. And that's really, really hard for the people who work in the organizations. And the reason I wanted to highlight that is one of the things I wanted to bring out is, I think for a lot of the funders that I've worked in, having that really clear mission and goal has been a really useful anchor point or North Star, if you will. And then I wanted to bring it back selfishly to a kind of an example of where I am now. So my team lead on equality, diversity, inclusion in research. So how do we embed that in both the workforce that we're trying to support, creating those inclusive environments, but also how do we embed it in the kind of research we want to propose to address those gaps in knowledge, to ensure that we are accelerating progress on prevention, detection, diagnosis, treatments for everybody. And we're not there yet. And we need to do that by framing it against the mission. So we were able to say, Cancer Research UK is about beating cancer for everyone. We're not there because there are stark inequalities. And as everybody is aware, COVID 19 really brought that home about the health inequalities that exist. And when we looked into that, we realized that we could really harness research to address those gaps. And so that, for me, goes hand in hand with ensuring you have a diverse and inclusive workforce. If you don't have a represented workforce, bringing those diversity of thoughts, I really love that phrase, Angus, when you said that, because I completely agree. The other thing it brings as well to the table is when you speak to the patient reps and those groups that are underserved, because it's on us to make the effort, not on them to come to us. Trust is a fundamental issue. And this is where I think the social sciences, arts, and humanities have been brilliant in giving the knowledge and the evidence. I'm very excited about what EDICa are doing. Having people who look like them makes a massive difference. It sounds really obvious and common sense. So all of these interconnected bits, and going back to your question, the reason I wanted to kind of outline that is in the 15 years or so that I've been involved in EDI, there was a lot of emphasis at the beginning around gender, rightly so, and it's still an issue, I'm sad to say, but there are initiatives and interventions that have been tried. And as the EDICa team have pointed out, evidence is fundamental, and I think using the evidence would be really helpful. I think I've seen discussions broaden out now to other characteristics, both characteristics that are in the Equality Act, but also others, recognizing humans are not one dimension. There are multiple factors, lived experience, the intersectionality. And so more and more of that is being discussed and looked at in EDI action plans from funders and learning from community. So I just wanted to highlight that. Kind of answered your question, Heather, but I hope that's okay.
No, it is absolutely okay. And I listening to all of you, I also, even though my job here obviously is to chair this panel rather than to necessarily contribute, but as someone who has been involved in EDI for the whole of their professional life, and I only came to be part of university at a very late age in life, actually. I only started working at Heriot-Watt 9 years ago. And before that, I hadn't worked in the university sector on a full-time basis. And this issue of you can't be what you can't see, which is what you were just describing, is very important. And as Angus said, the diversity of thought is very important. I became the EDI lead on a major grant back in 2019, which is our industrial decarbonisation grant. And I set out to make sure that people could see the opportunities to be a climate change warrior, if you like, and a climate change advocate. And there were a number of things we wanted people to see. First of all, it's not just scientists. You don't have to be a chemical engineer to make an impact on climate change. You could actually be a policy person. There's some amazing policy academics working in this area that are making real impact. And so they were people we wanted to highlight. Another underrepresented group are people for whom it's the first generation to go to university. And that covers all types of people. So we set out and made 48 films of people working on this grant. So, I mean, there were hundreds of people who were involved in this £20 million grant across 40 odd universities. But we invited, we didn't pick, we didn't try and pick different people. We just said, who would like to make a film about your career in your life? And we just hoped that we would get a real range of diversity, and we did. And the very first film was actually a man, and I had not expected that. But it was somebody from Wales who had grown up speaking Welsh, and who also whose family hadn't gone to university. So it was a minority in many ways, and we really started as we carried on with someone who had barriers and challenges, and I think that what we're here to do is to remove barriers and challenges, but unfortunately the support and help you get for removing those barriers and challenges go back to Anindya's point about resources. Interventions take resources. That film project was funded, as I said, by UKRI, but if we hadn't been able to do it, we couldn't have shown it into hundreds of schools, etc., etc., etc. So you need resources, and if the political climate is not supportive for resources, then it's very difficult to do interventions. So I'm a great believer in interventions, and I think that, backed up by the evidence, for instance, you mentioned proportionate workforces. What does the workforce look like in any given country? And then do different areas of academia represent those workforces? And if not, why not? And different projects, as you said. So you can't be what you can't see. And if people don't see someone that looks like them, they won't want to do that job, or they won't even know about that job, actually. I'm now going to come on to think about before we move to questions, I would like to think about EDI in today's world and to think about what are the opportunities, what are the challenges. I don't like to use the word threats, but if you were in a business school case study, you talk about a SWOT analysis. But let's think, what are the opportunities? What are the challenges? And do we have cause for optimism? So I'm going to come to my three panelists with these three areas to start with. And I'm going to start with Anindya. And Anindya, I'm coming to you to talk about the challenges, the barriers, some of the things you mentioned earlier when you were speaking. You do see across 17 HEIs, as you said, which is a really unique perspective. And I'm keen to hear from you. What are those challenges? And have you seen anybody actually tackling them or trying to address them or working their way around them?
Thank you so much, Heather. I'll pick up the last question first when you gave the list of questions about optimism. I'm temperamentally optimistic. But some would say naively so. But it's an to use a well-known phrase, it's an optimism of the will and a pessimism of the intellect. Things are hard, and I'm only optimistic because I know that they can be changed and that the power to change things rests with us. But I do not want that optimism to be mistaken for a sort of lack of understanding of how tough things are. The extremely sort of very correct point that both Shewly and Heather made about you can't be what you can't see. That brings a very direct a challenge. So one of the initiatives we at SAGSA have brought in over the last couple of years is a PhD student mentorship scheme. This takes doctoral researchers who are currently funded by SAGSA. The source of this funding is the HRC, so we've had to limit it to currently funded SAGSA doctoral researchers, and pairs them up with either an academic or a non-academic professional based on the interests and the needs of the doctoral researcher. And it has happened more than once that we've had a student, to give an example that's happened multiple times. Let's say a doctoral researcher who is Black would like to speak to an academic in Scotland working in the arts and humanities who is Black. And I'm looking at the list, I'm going, we have maybe 7, 8, all of whom are overworked, all of whom are the people their departments always go to when it comes to EDI work for reasons that are perfectly understandable. But while we are talking about resources and while we are talking about the need for visibility and the politics of representation and all of those things that are really important, we can't underestimate the extra burden that this places on the few people who are in a position to take up that burden, there isn't always the level of institutional interest or support in terms of workload relief or things like that, which makes it really hard because they are there to help. They want to help. That's what they're often temperamentally inclined to do, but there's only so much they can do. I mentioned earlier that the total number of funded doctoral researcher places in arts and humanities have gone down from between 40 and 50 across Scotland to 21. When it was that 40 to 50 level, it was a national competition, what we call the DTP, the Doctoral Training Partnership Open Competition. And it was a competition that was run by SAGSA, that was administered by SAGSA. And so we were able to do things like we had a few ring-fenced studentships available. So we had ring-fenced studentships for UK domiciled Black and minority ethnic applicants. We had ring-fenced studentships for refugee applicants. We had studentships for care experienced applicants, and so on. That number has now gone down from 40 to 50 to 21, as I said before, but it is also no longer a national competition. So that the new system, which is called the DLA, the Doctoral Landscape Award, the selection process has been devolved to individual HEIs. So instead of there being a national competition, there have been 7 institutions across Scotland who have been awarded this funding by the HRC, and each institution is able to make 3 studentships available per year. So 7 institutions, 3 studentships, that's 21. It is a much harder case to make to an institution when they have only been given enough funding for 3 studentships that they should ring fence one of those for EDI. That is a much, by many magnitude, much harder case to make. So I'm pretty certain, not going to have that kind of ring fencing for any arts and humanities doctoral research studentship in Scotland from now on. We had a similar widening participation, what we called a reweighting scheme, where for applicants who hit a certain number of hit one of a certain number of widening participation flags, we were able to say, okay, we are going to relatively underweight previous academic record and relatively overweight future potential. Again, you can't do that if you don't have a national competition, and you can't do that if each individual atomized competition you are only able to offer 3 studentships. So the resources challenge is immense, and it's to do with amount of money available. It's to do with number of bodies available. It's to do with the fact that precarity across the higher education sector, but particularly in arts and humanities, skews towards particular protected characteristics. And that's not even to get to class and first generation applicant, as Heather spoke of. And it means that all the number of people who I could approach in order to be a role model, in order to perform that role of you can't be what you can't see, is diminishing, and the few who are available have less and less time on their hands and less ability to do so. And in the process, there is less and less goodwill towards the sector as a whole for people to put in the extra time and extra effort that is needed for this kind of work. I'm going to stop there. I accept that this was a very depressing narrative. I still will return.
It's a very practical narrative.
But it is also, I refuse to give in. I remain optimistic, but it's harder to justify.
As you say, it's the optimism of the intellect, and I think that that's very valid. Okay, so moving along, Angus, I'm going to come to you now. As I said, we're looking at opportunities, the things that matter. I'm particularly interested in the research agenda and higher education's research agenda, and your experience about what has EDI brought to higher education that you have seen, and what is it possible to operate entirely without any regard to it these days?
Wow, there's a lovely set of questions to go with. But I actually want to start. I just want to play off something Anindya had said earlier about the scale of that. I'm specifically thinking here about the Black Professoriate, because that is a huge issue that in business schools we do not have people with an African heritage at that senior level. This is a real issue. I think we are seeing, and I can look at my own school, 2 recent appointments into accounting, coming from a West African heritage. We are seeing some change, but there is a real issue actually about that leadership oversight, that mentoring, that support. So I completely identify with the challenges that were identified earlier. This point about can it be ignored? The obvious answer is no. But it's amazing how sometimes engaging people enough with the agenda can be quite significant. So I'll just pick up, and I know we're not simply talking about gender, we're talking about all aspects of diversity and inclusion. But it's interesting, both at Lancaster and at Heriot-Watt, when we've put together working groups for Athena Swan submissions, then subsequent successfully having secured the award, gone and converted that into a full-blown EDI committee. The biggest challenge actually has been getting male colleagues to participate in that. So there's been a real issue there about, okay, this is not necessarily something for us. It absolutely has to be. I'm sorry. We all need to own this agenda, irrespective of gender, ethnicity, neurodiversity. We all need to own this space. So we can't ignore it. It's there all the time. I think it's reasonably well flagged up, but there are actually there's a difference between an awareness and actually people being engaged productively in this agenda. The reason I find it particularly perplexing and puzzling from a business school perspective is an awful lot of business schools, such as our own, have global campuses. So we are working in environments where we have colleagues who are predominantly from non-Western European backgrounds. And if we're working in a genuinely joined up manner, there should be that exposure to different cultural backgrounds. Now, in terms of what benefit a diverse workforce brings to business schools, at one level it's no different from what it brings to other organizations. And I'll pick up two themes that I think I hinted at earlier. One is about talent and the other is about perspectives. We know the challenges we have in getting really top quality world-class academics. We need to be able to attract the widest possible population, the widest possible talent pool to come in to address the great challenges we've got on the research side, but also delivering those outstanding programs. So we are really, really not doing ourselves any favor if we do not ensure that our hiring practices, our developmental practices, our promotion practices do not ensure that we can bring in, develop, nurture a really diverse talent pool. Now, one of the things that means is we need to be quite clear what are the differential challenges, I think it's fair to say, that academics from different backgrounds bring. How can we support them? So there's much more need for, it's not one size fit all development program, but it is much more tailored around the need. And this then does loop back to the point about, do we have enough senior colleagues coming from particular backgrounds? So that's the talent bit. But I'm particularly struck with thinking business schools. We work in an entirely globalized environment. We work in an environment of multinational companies. We work in an environment where even small businesses are exporting. They are working in supply chains that cut across borders. So this ability to understand really diverse workforces is absolutely huge. Now, while I'll probably shy away. And maybe this is a damning indictment of the current political environment. I might shy away from the term decolonizing the curriculum if we just suspend the title for a second and actually think we need to do far more in terms of developing awareness in students. I don't care whether in the UK, US, the Middle East, Southeast Asia, with, for example, and I'll keep sticking in West Africa for a second, what the cultural practices of leadership are, what we can learn from practices in parts of the world that we tend not to look at, and we're tending to run the risk of imposing either very Western or East Asian models and approaches. We need to pull this in. So for me, the whole intercultural studies piece is an absolutely massive area for research, and I think it's one angle of EDI. It's not necessarily the angle that EDICa is specifically driving and focusing on, but for a business school perspective, that is hugely important in terms of influencing practice in companies, but also shaping the students that are going to go into companies and in turn influence those organizations. So we don't want to get away from it. We need to actually, I would argue, embrace it ever more fully. And I'm incredibly proud of what Kate, James, and others in EDICa are doing. I think it's a fantastic piece. And actually the impact side of what they do is really deeply impressive. Large organizations, small organizations, into funding bodies, etc. But it is about looking at doing this work and making sure it has an impact. I'm not sure, Heather, whether I answered your question at all. I went off on a fairly wild ramble, but hopefully it was.
Angus, you answered the question and went off on a wild ramble, but it was very entertaining and very interesting. So that's great. Shewly, I'm coming to you last and definitely not least on the grounds of optimism.
Okay.
Have we got grounds for optimism? How should we go forward from here? Because all of these things that Anindya and Angus talked about are real.
Yeah.
There are real challenges. There are real needs. It's not something that anybody can ignore. And yet, it's tough to feel optimistic, however determined we are.
Yeah, no, I completely get that. And I'm with you, and I'm also an optimist by nature. And I think can't ignore the challenges that everybody's outlined really, really well. But I feel like we're not starting from scratch. There is momentum there. And the fact that there were so many people who've just joined this call and also joined the EDICa meeting itself, it felt really nice to be in the room. I have to be with people who were there for the same will and intent. So I guess I'm this is a personal view, not a CRUK view. So based on my experience and its opinion of one person, I'm optimistic for a number of reasons. I think we are building on momentum. Somebody rightly pointed out in the comments that about the representation point, and I just wanted to elaborate on that. I think I've seen funders, or I've learned that it's not just the visible representation, but actually I've seen a shift to the nuances, the inclusivity, because actually if you improve it for one group, inevitably you end up improving it, as somebody else said earlier, you end up improving it for everybody. So I was trying to kind of articulate my points, so bear with me, Heather. So I wanted to start with the premise that EDI, and Chris Smith said this in the keynote session for those of you who weren't able to join his session, and I 100% agree with this. EDI is undoubtedly good for science, it's good for research, and there's tons of evidence out there that has shown that it drives innovation, it drives creativity, and I really feel excited about where science and research generally is, because we're in a really exciting time. They're talking about the fourth revolution with data science and AI. It's transforming the way we're working. Some may say it's a little bit overly optimistic, but the point is we are where we are, and how do we take advantage? And I think academics, the research ecosystem, are always on the kind of cutting edge, driving things forward. You're leading by example. And one of the things I've been privy to is hearing discussions around how do you create ethical AI, for example. And by that, people are thinking about mitigating bias, making sure is co-designed from the beginning. So you're bringing all those other groups that traditionally may not be involved. A real opportunity, I think, to build it in from the outset and learn from all the things that we've talked about. So there's that. The government, if we put aside all the different things that we've heard and all the not so great negative things, I think personally, but the point, the government recognises a shortage of skills. They recognise that if we want to be leading the way in research, and it's good for the economy and it's good for the nation's health and wealth, then we need to be on the front step. And they talk about recruiting talent and they talk about training people up. We can say, if you want to achieve this, EDI has to be front and center in the middle of that. It's not a side nice to do thing. It's an imperative. And I think UKRI, I've seen them talk about it, and Chris talked about it very well in his talk, of course. We've talked about it in the medical charities. And one thing I wanted to share with everybody is the funders do talk to each other. It may not always be obvious. I promise you we do. Some have bigger budgets than others, and we're aware of that. And I think that sharing of intel and best practice, I've seen a shift from trying lots of EDI activities to actually recognizing the specialist roles. I agree with you, Anindya. Those people, we want sustainability. Why do we want to lose those people who've built up that expertise? And then, the contracts run out or there's not enough money. Funders can't solve that alone. So we need to work in partnership with the universities and the HEIs. And I don't have a solution, but I can talk about my little bit of the world. And so we've been working with our institutes who have inbuilt expertise, and we're saying, how can we share that expertise so they're not like an island and grappling with all the many different complexities they have to these days. The other thing I wanted to bring out is, and Angus, you reminded me about this, also the role of those other wraparound things. So again, funders, learning from universities, learner societies, mentorship, the allyship. I've actually seen really good allyship in STEM, I would say. It's really lovely. Actually, some of the best allies I've seen are from people might think, oh, are they really into it? But, you know, I'm going to say it, white, older man, who came from kind of a very privileged background, you could say, but one of the best allies I've seen who have been really driving. And I think you can't take it at face value. And I think, how do we support people who want to be allies? And I realize as funders, we've been talking about that. From a personal point of view, and learning from work at CRUK. So I've had the privilege of working with my team and colleagues across the organisation in launching our 5-year EDI in research strategy. And it's all around how do we embed equality, diversity and inclusion, both within how we think about being a fair funder, so that we create that diverse and inclusive research community that we all aspire to. What does that mean? So what are the things we need to do? And we think we're not complacent. We know we can do more because it's definitely not fixed. And how do we continue the momentum, learn? And for example, we can definitely do more to support people with disabilities. We are lagging behind, and we found that in our scoping work. We can definitely do more to support women continue towards senior careers. We definitely need to do more to support people from Black heritage backgrounds, but there are so many other communities, as people have highlighted in the questions, and we're really thinking carefully about how do we make that inclusive? And it's really, really hard. I do not have an answer to that. And I kind of wanted to end with a couple of examples. So I don't know if people are aware, Livy Hume Trust announced not too long ago a whole initiative and funding around equality, diversity, inclusion. I have a lot of time for Livy Hume Trust because they're cross-disciplinary, it's all about blue skies, they're independent. And again, we've been talking to them behind the scenes because we want to share learnings, we want to help each other out. And I think saying that a bit more openly, I hope, is a positive signal. And UKRI, just heard Chris talk about how they want to take the learnings from EDICa and think really carefully about what does that mean for how UKRI implement that in their funding practices and their terms and conditions. And I think that was a really positive thing to hear. And then the final thing I wanted to say, and then I will stop. So Kate put up a really great slide, which I think got lots of people thinking about the ideal researcher. So in her work, the kind of, I think, horrible myth that persists that to be an ideal researcher, you don't go to the toilet very much. You're a man, you're this or you're that. And it really struck home. It resonated with lots of people, and I would love it. I'm optimistic that hopefully we'll be able to show a slide that shows multiple slides of what ideal researcher looks like. And that is not all of those things, but lots of different things. So I will end there. Thanks, Heather.
Thank you very much, Shewly. So we now have all of 7 minutes to answer some questions. And so I'm going to come to you with one question each. Before I do that, I'm just going to try and answer a few myself in the interest of time. Nikki, you asked about the UK landscape. You've heard Angus reference Africa and indeed Scandinavia. I think we have learned a lot also, I think, from looking at the US and seen that in the US that it's very difficult now in the funding environment there. So we want to make sure that we learn some lessons from there too. And on an international basis, the question in the chat about, how can Heriot-Watt operate in Dubai. I was sent to Dubai in 22 to lead it as a postmenopausal 60-year-old woman. It was a very strong signal to everybody that women could be in positions of leadership. And by being here, I have been able to support a lot of other people who wouldn't otherwise have had our support. And that, to me, is the role of universities all over the world, actually, is that we can support these things and we can support change. Another thing I'm particularly proud of here is that we have actually launched 2 years ago the GCC Gender Board Index, where we count all 755 listed companies in the GCC countries in the Gulf, and we list how many of them don't have a woman on the board. And believe me, there's nothing like naming and shaming to get people thinking about diversity on their board of directors. So that's something we showed in the 30% Club. So I've been really, really thrilled to have the opportunity to move here and to be able to operate here, because I've seen the impact that education can make and research can make. And finally, the issue about role models. I do just that it is, you can't be what you can't see, outdated. We don't find it, because when we go into schools, people really, students, young students, especially first generation immigrants, really struggle to see themselves in jobs, and that's really where it's very powerful. And what Anindya talked about, which is the pressure on role models, at the Royal Society of Edinburgh, my key role is to actively seek out minority ethnic applicants for the Royal Society of Edinburgh. And by the way, all of you, if you've got any suggestions for nominations, previous, but I'm very proud that every year since I joined the Royal Society of Edinburgh, I have managed to propose a successful minority member. And that proactively going and persuading these people to go forward is jolly hard work, because they, as Anindya says, that the burden of being a role model is so hard. So these are all relevant and helpful things to be discussed. But in our and Nikki, great idea about the word cloud. We will have to run something like that. But if I could just reverse backwards, Angus, engagement of male colleagues, you can see in the chat, in the Q&A, engagement of male colleagues. Do you think you find them resistant?
No, it's not. It's not resistant, but it's almost as if the sense that well, that's actually somebody else's agenda, and I can't. I'll be perfectly honest. I'm not 100% sure whether it's okay. We'll step back to allow others to be involved, or actually it's not our agenda. So it's certainly been a case of pushing hard to achieve that. But can I just say one other thing, because I think I just want to pick up about not looking like us. When I was at Lancaster, we did very, very badly in terms, we not that far away, East Lancashire, we had quite a large population of first generation and second generation immigrants. And actually getting that immigrant community to come and engage with the university was a real challenge. And it was very much a case about using role models, and it really did work into that particular community. So I think this point about role models, I think it's still valid practically.
No. Okay, thank you very much. Anindya, can I come to you now? And can I just ask you if you've seen Sandra's note at the bottom? And I don't know to what extent, because I was very interested in this question about trade unions and the role of who can help, because earlier you were talking about how everybody can try and address the resources issue. I mean, I have found that in all my work with the trade unions that they're superb at identifying where there might be disparities, and the casework they do is all incredibly well informed. What do you, but in terms of actually any active role in this agenda, do you have any view on that? And do you have any
Yes.
view about the research question at the end?
Yes, I'll do my best. I should declare
Thanks.
an interest. I'm UCU Equalities Officer for UCU Scotland.
Oh, that makes you perfect. I didn't know that.
And I'm also the casework coordinator for my branch in St Andrews.
Right.
So see casework directly, and I have a role in shaping equalities policies, hopefully at UCU. Yeah, trade unions are an indispensable part of this process. We every day up and down the sector, up and down universities, we have caseworkers working on ensuring members have access to reasonable adjustments, that stress-related absences are dealt with properly, that workload issues are handled sensitively and fairly, that pay negotiations go well. Like all of the work that UCU and other trade unions do across our sector helps to make our sector fairer and more equitable. I don't know if this answers the research question specifically, Sandra's question. I'll try to. I do think that it is important that those of us who do EDI work, and those of us who are trained to do what is, for want of a better word, critical thinking, do remember to subject our institutions to the same critical thinking that we are trying to do, and we subject our research to it as well.
That's very
Institutions aren't
important.
perfect, and
that's-
not everyone in the institution has an equally positive relationship to EDI. And where we see that, we have to call it out, and trade unions are an absolutely vital element of that.
Thank you very much. Shewly, I know that you're about to hop on a train to London, but I just want to finish with you. You've had some words on this already.
Yeah.
What can people do to protect the people that EDI in the research grants that you hand out?
Oh, it's a really hard question. And every funder has a different approach. I think we've been thinking about so for larger initiatives, building it in. So I can give you an example where at NERC, when I was there, we had these large 10-year programs which was around solving, I don't know, shifting Glasgow to become net zero. It's a very fun project, very interdisciplinary, and EDI was fundamental to delivering that. How can you create an inclusive solution if you don't think about equality? And so they hired people long-term who were experts in that and can develop that. And then one of the things that we had open conversations about with Glasgow and other universities is funders sadly can't fund forever. That's always going to be an issue with any initiative. So how are you going to start thinking early about sustainability? Because these are key skill sets. They're not going to go away. You might call them something else. And I know that's not a direct answer. It's a really tricky one.
No, it's a very good answer. And your actual answer about building it in and building it into the metrics. I think we all need to measure the things that we value. Otherwise, we will end up only valuing the things that we measure. So I would like to see the measurement that is built into research metrics it be involved, not just about publications and citations and so forth, but also and dissemination, but having EDI metrics built into that.
And if I may, I think it's also acknowledging that EDI is not saying just, because just makes it sound as though it's not important. It is. It's more than HR. Sometimes I have found that even when we were trying to look at inequalities in research, we were automatically signposted to somebody in HR, and actually we were looking for something broader, them as well as other people. And I think it's acknowledging that it's a really valuable and interdisciplinary skill set, actually. So I think that valuing bit from both funders and the HEIs is important.
Yeah. Now, I know we haven't been able to get to all these questions, but I am already 3 minutes late, and I know I'm in dreadful trouble. But I know that all of these things are being aired during the day today. I again like to thank EDICa for leading this day and providing such an amazing opportunity for so many people, including us. And Lizzie has posted into the chat the next session. Thank you very much, everybody.